Hi, I'm Patricia Maslin of Millwall No One Likes Us Talking. You're about to listen to two of my colleague panellists on our Millwall fan show, Gary Staff and Jeff Burnige. Jeff is interviewed by Gary as he recounts his memories of 12 players, which this week has become 13 individuals of great interest during the past 45 years. This covers the period that Jeff was a member of the Millwall board for 22 years. This final episode focuses on the last 7 who wore the Lions colours: Paul Moody, Les Briley, David Livermore, Ben Thompson, Mahlon Romeo, Shaun Hutchinson, and finishing with Tim Cahill. Enjoy.
Not everybody likes them, but they don't care.
Hi Jeff, and welcome back to the second part of this No One Likes Us Talking special podcast.
Hi Gary, good to speak to you again. Hope everyone enjoyed last week's.
Indeed. You're going to tell us about some Millwall legends again this week, Jeff. This week we're going to be discussing Paul Moody, Les Briley, David Livermore, Ben Thompson, one of our own, Mahlon Romeo and Shaun Hutchinson.
I suppose it's true to say that for our younger listeners, some of those are a bit more recent, and they may be thinking, "Oh God, he's not going to go through all those oldies and goodies again, is he?" But there you are. We're in business. Let's get cracking.
Let's get going. So, welcome back, Jeff. So, Paul Moody. That's where we're going to start. Paul Moody joined us in 1999 and stayed for 2 seasons. Not long enough, in my opinion, scoring 25 goals over the 2 seasons. Paul was part of the 2000-2001 team that won the second division title, forming a formidable partnership with that man, Neil Harris. Paul then moved on to Oxford after 2 good seasons with the Lions, and even though his visit was short, far too short, he will always have a place in Millwall history. Tell me about Paul, Jeff.
I don't think I have to remind people how popular he was, how well received he was, what a great job he did in those 2 years. And when he did come back to the Den and was introduced to people before the game, he got a great reception, and I know that meant a lot to him. He's a really nice man, very self-effacing, very modest. You have a story about his modesty, don't you? Which you'll remind people about later. But
I will do.
What I can do is to tell people how he came to sign for us. It was just as Richard Sadlier was emerging, but he was very young, very raw, hadn't yet learnt how to totally believe in himself. And Rhino and Macca was the management team, backed up by Bob again, Bob Pearson, who we talked about a lot last week. They wanted someone that could play the role that Sadlier was going to play if he was unavailable or finding the season a bit long. They wanted someone that could play the same role, but they also wanted someone clever enough to play with him or play with Chopper. So they always had the option of doing it 2 different ways, and it reminded us at the time of the partnership between Cascarino and Sheringham, 2 big men. There was no reason why 2 intelligent and selfless players like Moods and like Richard Sadlier couldn't hit it off, and in fact they did. And it was just great. I mean, lovely man, did a great job for us, and we even managed to do good business. We signed him at about the age of 30. And when he did leave to go back to Oxford, where they also loved him because he had a spell earlier there in his career, we got all our money back. Not his wages, but on the transfer fee. So great bit of business, and 2 years was far too short, I agree. And although it's all those years ago, very, very well remembered, both by us and by Paul himself. But what was it you remember him doing?
I remember him being...
Was it the last game? Wasn't it his last game?
It was his last game against our dear friends Oldham... What are they called? Oldham...
Athletic,
that's it. Couldn't remember their last bit. We obviously won that 5-0. Mr. Reid was famous in that for striking one of the greatest balls I've ever seen in my life. But Neil was also going for the Golden Boot. Moody had got 2 already that game, 2 headers, I believe, which was I think most of his goals were. And we got a penalty, which was never a penalty in my eyes, in the last 5 minutes. And Moody just gave the ball straight to Neil and said, "Go on, son, you get the golden boot," which he did give him. That's the selflessness of the man. I don't think many people realised he was obviously going to leave at the end of the season, and he came back a couple of times after, and he always got a good reception. But he's a genuinely good guy, and probably one of my players that I always look back on fondly in the Millwall shirt.
Well, he came out of non-league. I mean, he was quite late into professional football. About 23, he played non-league near. He comes from the Portsmouth area. And he played for local non-league clubs. I think Waterlooville, or was it already Havant and Waterlooville?
I think that was them.
It might have been Gosport. Those little teams down there. Signed up for Southampton, and he did really well there. I mean, he played quite a few games. I don't think they were in the top division. They may have even been in what would now be League One. Statos on our audience will know that. But he did very well there, scored goals there. But I think Oxford bought him from there when they had a bit of money. And then Fulham took him, didn't they? And it was from Fulham that we bought him.
We did.
So, yeah, it's a while ago, but the fact is he remembers his time at Millwall very, very fondly. And he was recently on one of our No One Likes Us Talking podcasts, wasn't he? And
he was, and they can be found again if you go back on Spreaker or other.
I think he took the mickey out of me on that broadcast as well. So I might have to replay that and find out what exactly he said and look out for him next time I see him.
Indeed.
So that's Moods, good old Moods. That was a choice of yours, by the way, rather than a choice of mine. Who did I choose next?
You chose Mr. Briley, who joined us in 1984 from the Shots of Aldershot. Les made 227 appearances for Millwall over 7 seasons with the Lions. He captained the Lions for the infamous season where they were promoted to the top flight of English football for those very, very, very fun 2 seasons. Les scored 13 goals from the midfield and formed one of the most famous of Millwall midfield partnerships with a very young Terry Hurlock. Tell us about Les.
Well, of course, he still does bits for the club, doesn't he? I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he co-commentator on the iFollow games that we've just had? He
was, with our dear friend of the show, who I believe is on, has been on recently, Carl.
Yeah, but Les is, no one needs me to remind them what Les did. He was the captain of the greatest ever Millwall team, if you're talking about achievement. I mean, we've waited 100 and odd years to get into the top division. And eventually we did it back in 1988. He was the captain. And I'll never forget his contribution there. He formed a fantastic midfield partnership, as you said, with Sir Terry. Who can forget those scenes at the Den when we celebrated having finished the previous game at Hull 7 points clear at the top. We didn't just squeak into the playoffs or anything like that. We absolutely killed the division. Seriously, we were 7 points clear with 1 game to go. I think everyone remembers we ended up 4 points clear because we were celebrating so long after the whole game that I think the Blackburn game came around a bit quicker than the players realised, and I think 1 or 2 of them only made it back to London on the Friday. And such were the celebrations. But look, some of that might be an exaggeration. Perhaps it was only the Thursday. But it
was definitely the Old Kent Road that had a bit of went a bit dry after that night.
2 things about Les. People would like to know how he came to sign for us, I think. He was at Aldershot, as you said. George Graham was the manager. He'd come in, he'd got his own chief scout, David Court, who he'd played with at Arsenal. And I think he was just sizing Bob up and what Bob could do. And eventually he sent him to Aldershot for a midweek game. Aldershot, I think, were in what would now be League Two at the time. To run a final rule over a striker called Dale Banton, who George had been strongly recommended to, and I think we were close to doing it. And Bob went and came back and said, sorry, George, he wouldn't be your type at all. He's not brave enough. You like a brave player. He's quick. He's got talent, but he pulls out of things. You won't like him. And George looked disappointed, and then Bob said, but on the other hand, I've got the midfield player you've been telling me you're looking for. This was long before the promotion campaign, wasn't it? Because it was a George Graham signing. And in fact, the deal we did was a swap deal with the great Andy Massey, who still works in the academy, another great lad, another self-effacing lad, never talks about himself, doing a great job, I believe, at the academy. But it was a swap transfer. Andy Massey to Aldershot, Les Briley to Millwall, and Les always claims that we had to give money to Aldershot as well as Andy Massey. Andy always claims that Aldershot had to give us money for Andy Massey, I can't remember which, so I think I'll go with Andy's. No, I think I'll go with Andy Massey's version because I'll see him before I see Les. But and the other thing I remember about Les, which I know you remember because we've discussed this in the past, Gary.
We have indeed.
That great goal at Arsenal in the second season we were up, where I think it finished a 0-0 draw at Highbury, and inexplicably Les's 30-yard blockbuster was disallowed for offside. No one knew. No one could work it out.
And I said to you, I still didn't know. And after our discussion, I'm more afraid. But I believe that did that not go on and help change the rules?
I don't know if it actually on its own changed the rules. But what happened was when we asked afterwards, and of course I was in a privileged position being on the board then, and we asked the referee, and he said the linesman said that Teddy Sheringham was offside and he was out near the corner flag. So clearly not interfering remotely in the game. I know that referees have meetings, don't they? The International Football Board always looking at things, and I think they then started to say that if a player had to be interfering with play to be offside. That was clearly one of the instances that they were considering. But if you think about it, I saw goals disallowed when a wide player, we used to call them wingers, by the way, and a winger would cross from the byline, the centre-forward would head it in, and certain linesmen would give the winger offside, particularly if it was against us. So,
I think funny you say that, Jeff, about wingers and stuff like that. I still don't know what a number 9 and number 10 is. They all talk about these days. I'm a bit hazy myself. Anything other than 4-4-2, I'm struggling a bit. But there you are. Indeed.
That's Les. He'll always be an absolute legend because he had the great honour, but he did it very, very well, of skippering the Lions to the promised land. What a shame it only lasted 2 years. It should have lasted longer. The team that we had should have done better than that.
And as we spoke about before, that I feel if that Arsenal game had gone in our favour, it might have kept us up that season and stabilised the ship, and you never know what could have happened. But that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. A few results started going against us after that. And if I remember rightly, we only won one game towards the end of the season, a 2-0 against Aston Villa at home.
It was the only game we won after the New Year.
Yeah.
I think. But look, Highbury, it's a shame we couldn't go back because Highbury is a lucky ground for us. I was very upset when they moved into the new stadium because we had a great record at Highbury. There was the famous 1995 FA Cup win, which was actually a replay, I now recall. Mark Beard and Mark Kennedy scoring those goals. Yeah. Everyone's got that on YouTube. Everyone knows that one. We had that 0-0 draw. We always done well there. One year we almost nicked the clock from the clock end, if you remember. The newspapers were convinced that's what we were up to. Farcical. Obviously a good old South London wind-up on that journalist. But the other game at Highbury that people will have forgotten, in the old days, in the FA Cup, you had unlimited replays until you got a result. And we played Leyton Orient in the FA Cup, first at home, I think, then away, both draws. And the second replay was at Highbury, which I think we won 3-0 against Orient. So I was sad that we couldn't go back to Highbury and win again.
Was that common in the day, Jeff, that they played the third replay at a neutral ground? I've never heard of that before at all.
Oh, no, it was the rule. You played at home, then the reverse fixture was at the other ground, and after that it had to be on neutral venues.
Oh, okay.
I remember those very well. I don't think we were involved in many, but I remember, they used to go farcically. They have gone as far as a fourth and even a fifth game. You certainly couldn't fit that in today with today's schedule. That's what happened. I don't know what game that was. I'm sure someone will tell me.
Right, well, let's move on to someone a bit more recent. Let's go to our dear friend David Livermore. He was part of also that 2000-2001 side. He joined us in 1991 from the aforementioned Arsenal. Like Paul Moody and Neil Harris, David was part of that team, who I've just said. David scored 12 goals, played 275 games, I think it was, for us during that time. Before moving on, I think it was to Hull before, and then maybe on to Leeds. One of the two, or maybe Leeds, then on to Hull. But I think he was only at one of those clubs. I think it was Leeds for 6 weeks before being moved on, which is really strange to think to happen. David came back to us in 2012 as the youth team coach during that period when we were getting a lot of ex-players back, which I do like the sound of, before being promoted to assistant manager when Neil Harris became the manager. Tell me more.
Well, Livers, I think that he's one of those players that possibly deserves to be hero worshipped a bit more, because he played in a 4-4-2, and on the two central midfield players, that is quite onerous, probably even more so in today's football. And the other one he was with was, of course, the great Tim Cahill. And Tim's real strength was getting into the other side's box, coming late, and scored many a goal and continued scoring goals for Everton and for Australia, didn't he? Doing exactly that.
He did.
But, very often it left Livers minding the shop, and he did occasionally have to take Tim's player out because he was left with two. So I think Livers was an underrated player. Happily, he went on to become Player of the Year. Can't remember which year. Very well deserved. And ended his time near enough at Millwall by playing in the cup final. So he was there on that memorable Old Trafford semi-final, playing his usual steady game, letting Tim go ahead and get all the glory. Well-deserved glory, and then playing in the final. And I think he has sometimes said he didn't have the best of games, but the penalty he conceded was never a penalty, and the player that got the other goal was offside, in my humble Millwall opinion. So, but he was there for the great game, possibly the most memorable game in Millwall's history, possibly the semi-final at Old Trafford. The interesting thing about Livers was how he came to sign. Would you like to know about that?
Of course.
Well, he was a youth team player at Arsenal. I believe he was mainly used as a second centre-half, alongside the big man. Played through the youth team like that. Got a pro contract. I think probably got close to playing, like pre-season friendlies and so on. They didn't have 8 subs in those days. Eventually it became clear that he was available. And Bob had seen him in the reserves and fancied him as the defensive midfield player. And so we signed him, and the first Arsenal knew that he was a midfield player was when we played him in midfield. I honestly believe that. But he nearly didn't come to us because he failed his medical. There was a situation with his knee, and our medical staff said we couldn't sign him. Great consternation. In the end, Bob went on behalf of Rhino and Macca to see Reg Burr. I was well aware of it, and I think I'd rehearsed with Bob what he was going to say. And we took him on loan for a period, with the idea being, look, if he plays enough games, then we'll sign him permanently. I don't think his knee was ever insured, to be honest with you, in the whole time he was with us. But he did play 275 games and didn't miss many. So, it was justified in the end. What a free transfer that was. And, I've got a lot of time for the man. I think he's a great guy. And in all honesty, not every Millwall fan will agree with me, but if Millwall can't get promoted, as we speak, it's still possible for Cardiff to get into the playoff final. It's looking a bit tough at the moment, but for me, if Neil and Livers could get Cardiff up, that would be the next best thing to me to us getting up. So, I'm a great admirer of Livers, and I can't say too much. I can't speak too highly of him. There you are. That's why I picked him. Indeed.
Lovely sentiment, Jeff. Lovely sentiment. So, let's move on to one of our own, Mr. Ben Thompson. Ben,
go on, you tell me what the stats are.
Go on then. Ben has been at Millwall since 2012 as a youth team player for 2 seasons, before becoming a full pro in 2014. He made his debut against Southampton in the League Cup. Unfortunately, we lost 2-0. He came on for Mr. Jimmy Abdu. Ben popped out on loan to Portsmouth for 23 games, and I think the 2017-2018 season, correct me if I'm wrong. But he is now firmly back in the Lions fold, and Ben has scored 9 goals for the Lions. 1 or 2 of them being a screamer. I remember one, I can't think of it against, I'm thinking Hull, from outside the edge of the box, in his second or third season as a full pro. But Ben, one of our own, and let's just hope he goes on to be like our dear Mr. Cripps, I think we're going to say.
I was going to pair. Look, he may have to fight for his place, and Harry Cripps during the 1960s and early 70s. Very often we signed a new fullback, and Harry was supposed to be under pressure, but he always came through. His determination was so great, his love of the club was so great. And if Ben has a challenge in front of him, because there are some very good midfield players at Millwall now, and possibly more to come from what you read. Yeah. But I have a feeling that Ben's the type that will overcome all adversities and make himself, absolutely, a must play type of guy. And I don't think he was at his best, was he, after the lockdown? He looked as if he hadn't fully recovered from the injury. Yeah. He did play the whole, I think, of the last game, or virtually the whole of it, which I was very pleased about. Unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about how he came to sign. These recent ones, I don't know so much about, obviously having long gone from the board, 10 years ago now. But I had to have Ben in this talk because I'm such a huge fan of his, and I do believe in recruitment. I do believe in youth development, and we hadn't, in recent years, produced very much from our youth team. Aidan O'Brien was one, I think, just before Ben. There wasn't too much else, and I just loved being able to join in and sing "He's one of our own," Ben Thompson, he's one of our own, and I couldn't possibly have done this programme without including Ben.
Hi, Bethany Warren here. You may have heard me as part of the Millwall No One Likes Us talking team, who form the fans panel of our Millwall fan shows. Not to worry if you haven't. Our Millwall fan shows is broadcast every Friday and can be listened to or downloaded on our social media links on Facebook and also Twitter, on Millwall No One Likes Us talking groups, or you can find us on Spreaker, iTunes and YouTube as well. Full of topical news with views from the fans, pundit and players from the past on the show. Don't miss our Millwall fan show with the Millwall No One Likes Us talking team every Friday from 8 p.m.
Okay, so also one of our current squad, we have Mr. Romeo. Mahlon is part of the current squad and is famously the son of Soul to Soul singer Jazzy B. Romeo broke into the side in 2015, scoring on his debut against Walsall in a 3-1 victory. He must have thought, this pro lark is easy. He has only scored 1 more goal since. Romeo has 12 appearances for Antigua and Barbuda.
Do the Antigua fans sing Mahlon Romeo, he's one of our own, he's one of our own, do you think?
I would love to think that. Would love to know what language they were using as well.
It's nice to see his dad in the West Stand, in the Barry Kitchener stand.
Does he go quite a lot?
I think he goes every home game.
Really?
Yeah, I see him all the time. There, and I remember Soul to Soul.
Yeah, I do very much so.
I was well into that, and it's amazing to find that the great Jazzy B is now a regular attendance at Millwall home games. That's amazing. And
well, maybe we should try and get him to do a concert one day.
That idea has been mentioned, I think, but I don't know if it would go anywhere. But all I can tell you is about Mahlon. I do remember a little bit about his arrival, having again been at Arsenal in the youth team policy, in the youth policy there. Didn't quite make the grade there. They're looking for a very high standard, aren't they? The top 4 or 5 clubs, and he got released and went to our dear friends Gillingham. And I don't think they ever really worked out what they'd got. I think he only made 1 appearance, and one of our scouts had recommended him and thought he was underrated and thought he should be in the side. Well, someone that couldn't get in Gillingham's side was not an obvious signing. But we ended up taking Mahlon in for, I think, a week's trial. But I believe after a day or two, the decision was made that, look, we're going to sign him. And we did. And as you know, I always believe in being well prepared so that when the opportunity comes up, you can take it. That was a case of that. My only complaint about Mahlon, if he ever hears this podcast, is that I was led to believe by his debut that we got a goal-scoring right back on our hands. Someone that would come forward and, score a few every season. But we've had to wait a long time for a third goal. Perhaps it will come in a very, very important game. Maybe it will be the game that takes us into the Premier League.
Oh,
that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be lovely.
Mahlon came third in this year's Player of the Year vote.
He did.
No shame in being third behind Bart and Jed Wallace. I think he's much appreciated by our fans, and my appreciation of him revolves around the fact that he played a lot of his football under Neil in a 4-4-2 with Jed Wallace wide on the right, and the two of them regularly carved out opportunities to cross on that right-hand side down by the corner flag, sometimes joined over there by Morrow to act as a bit of a decoy, but you always knew if Jed and Mahlon were playing football down in that corner that a cross was likely to result, and that happened a lot. I think it was a big part of our attacking play, and who's not a fan of Mahlon? He's wonderful.
Exactly. What a man. Okay, so let's move on to another one of our current squad. Shaun Hutchinson forms a formidable defensive partnership with the Mr. Jake Cooper. Shaun joined Millwall from Fulham in 2016 and has been ever present in the Millwall team since. He's played 123 games so far, scoring 11 goals, of which I think 6 are this season. Shaun was part of the Millwall side that won promotion back to the Championship in 2018.
Well, I don't know anything about how he came to sign for us, but I know that it was from Fulham, and I know that he had played some games for them. But he reminds me, his career at Millwall reminds me of the career of Alan McCleary in that promotion side into the First Division, in that whichever centre-back he played with, he made look good. Brilliant reader of the game. He's not a small man, but he's great in the air. But he's great in that second centre-half role, and he has chipped in with a few goals, probably more than people realise. How are you going to get this season, Gary?
Got 6 this season. 6.
Yeah, I mean, that's not bad. We'll take that from a centre-back.
Exactly.
Look, I'm a huge, huge fan of Hutchinson. That's why I've chosen him. I think that I like, if I don't know how they came to join the club, I like to come up with a particular memory. everybody was in that magical Millwall away following that went to Bristol Rovers that day, when we weren't certain by any means of getting in the playoffs, having failed in the playoff final the year before. We desperately wanted to get in the playoffs again and get back to Wembley. It was Wembley then, wasn't it? Yes, it was.
Yes, it was,
I think we were 2 up. Bristol Rovers pulled it back to 2-2. I'm a bit vague. You have to remind me. And then about 4 minutes from the end, Hutch scored a brilliant header, I think, off of a corner. My memory of it, really, more than anything else, is just how mental we all went behind that goal. It was a crazy one. Much, much loved. And I believe you were there, Gary, weren't you?
No, I wasn't there. I was walking around Spain. So we went 2-0 up. I was more than happy to sit there enjoying my sangria, sat by the beach, sat by the pool in Spain. And then all of a sudden, a football match appeared out of nowhere. And it was just one goal here, one goal there. Bristol, what were they doing? They were on the beach, they should have been, and they were giving us a game. And anyway, cut a long story short, I decided to take myself off for a walk away from my family and friends because I know I would have been an absolute nightmare sat there with them. And half an hour later, we'd got ourselves to the playoffs. But, whoa, it was horrible walking around. And also, I can tell you a little story about the final as well. I had no chance of rearranging my tickets because I was due to be flying to San Francisco. So the whole time I was in the air, I didn't know anything about the game. So I landed in San Francisco with my wife and kid. And my wife had obviously got a text from my family back home saying, does he know yet? And literally I saw a look on her face as if to say, oh, what does that mean? And she went, do you want me to tell you? Because I'd got a recording somehow getting to me when I was in America, which I still watched. And she said, oh, yeah, it's good news. Mr. Morrison, in the 86th minute, I think it was, has done it for you. So I literally stood in the middle of San Francisco airport about 10 o'clock at night, jumping up and down, almost crying, because we were where we deserved to be.
You've just sent shivers down my spine, even recalling that moment. That was, well, for some of our more recent fans, our younger fans, that was an absolutely magic moment, wasn't it? And Morrow was not someone that came to smile easily. He was a very, very driven footballer. But even he could not resist giving the biggest grin as he ran over to the Millwall fans by the corner flag at that end. Absolutely on fire with pleasure. And even thinking about it now, it was a brilliant moment, wasn't it? Oh, you weren't there.
It was, well, yeah.
I wish I was. Have you ever watched the film?
The video, the whole game?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen the whole game, yeah.
Tight game, very tight game.
Oh, it was. We weren't on top. We weren't on top for a period of that game. And Bradford should have won it equalised in the last minute if the guy had passed it instead of taking the glory.
You're dead right, but look, what's in the record books? Millwall won.
Bradford 0. They must hate
Bradford 1-0.
Because they played us the season before, and we obviously beat them 3-1.
I think we actually won at Bradford, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
final the year before.
Yeah, and then they obviously lost in the playoff, the final itself, and now they've hit a downward spiral. Are they not back in the second division now as well?
They are. They've had their problems like all clubs. They're a big club to be in League Two. Sooner or later, someone makes some good decisions there.
It's a big ground as well for League Two, isn't it?
Yeah. It's always a little bit. Mixed feelings going there because of that dreadful fire that happened.
Yeah, exactly. And didn't we get promoted in 1985, that season when George got us promoted?
We were just getting promoted when that news came through of that fire.
Yeah.
Let's not dwell on that. It was awful. Absolutely awful. But I rather remember Morrow's face when he scored that goal, and that team then went up, didn't it, and finished 8th with 72 points the following season in the Championship, which was a brilliant season.
It was. And going back on something you just said there, we finished 8th that season. The second season after that, I think we finished 20th. We finished 8th again this season. And there's one person that was very missing from the second half of the season, the second season, and that was Shaun. We didn't mention it earlier. Shaun Hutchinson, about when he got injured over Christmas and had a bad injury, didn't he? Well, I do believe.
What was the nature of that injury? We were told he'd had an accident putting the bins out.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good one to me, and I think we'll probably never know the full truth of that one. But you're quite right to say that we did miss him, and that was one issue we had for the second half of that rather difficult season. No Millwall fans enjoyed that half season, did they?
No, not at all.
Neil certainly didn't, because he was forced to play relegation fighting football. It wasn't pretty to watch, but we had to do it, and we stayed up, and that's formed the basis of what we've done in the season just finishing. And the other thing, of course, was that the strike force that had done so well for us, Morrison and Gregory, it was beginning to run out of steam, wasn't it? In that season, and they didn't score a lot of goals between them, did they? It's
a shame, really, because I'd like to have now thinking on the spot, I'd like to have seen Gregory with Smith playing together, because the pace of Smith, I like Bradshaw, but I think Gregory was more of a terrier, and he used to win a lot more balls. Now I can imagine Smith and Gregory being able to form a nice little partnership, actually. Maybe a comeback.
Well, look, did you notice that he scored the 2 goals right at the end of the season for Stoke?
Yeah.
In their last game, he scored the last 2 goals, and he hasn't had a brilliant year there.
No.
They've got a lot of players. A lot of players have played some of the season and not all the season. He's one of them. Do
you think it was a case of trying to get yourself back in the shop window?
No, I don't think so. I just think that all strikers can go through spells when they don't score for 9 or 10 games. Even Jamie Vardy's done it.
Yeah,
and he's ended up winning the Golden Boot. And big fan of Gregory's. A lot of Millwall fans think he should have scored a higher percentage of goals from the chances he had. They may be right. I'm not so sure, but
even the great Ian Wright used to say, no, not Ian Wright, Jerry Henry used to say 1 in 6 is always a good ratio, if you know what I mean. 1 in 6.
Well, yeah. I don't think Ian Wright said that. He wasn't happy unless he scored with every chance he got. But
yes, that's true. And
there's another story about Wrighty which will be told one day. But
indeed.
Right, we were talking about Morrow, weren't we? We get sidetracked. We were talking about Morrow or Hutchinson.
We were talking about Hutchinson, but I want to bring something up. I want to bring someone up. We've not included him. We're going to drop him in at the end of this conversation, and I believe he's a good friend of yours. And a little surprise for people listening to this, so I hope they listen right to the end, is a player who played in the 2000-2001 season, and that is our friend from across the longest pond, and that is our friend from Australia, Mr. Tim Cahill, who I believe is a friend of the family. Jeff.
I thought you were talking about Alistair Edwards when you said came from Australia there for a minute. No, I mean, you shot me with that one, but I mean, Tim Cahill, what can you say? I mean, I'm an emotional man, and when he came back to the club, that had me absolutely in tears, because I'd always known, from knowing Tim quite well in his early days at Millwall, I'd always known that he quite fancied the idea of ending his career by coming back to where he started his professional career at Millwall. And for a man that had done what he'd done in the game, World Cups, Premier League, many games at Premier League level, I think that is a measure both of what a great club it is that he formed that attachment, but also what a great guy he is. He's another one I would describe as a driven individual, very ambitious, and who can forget what he did for us? I mean, scoring that magical goal, which we can all still see clearly, can't we? If anybody that's listening to this, if you watch that goal again and you watch Paul Ifill make a typical Paul Ifill run and shot, you watch Tim's run, he bends that run twice, I think, and he's following Ifill's run, he's following the shot, he's following the goalkeeper's parry, and he's right on the ideal spot to slam the ball in. And he then ran the length of the field, didn't he, with his shirt being waved over his head. Someone told me, it might have been you, Gary, when we spoke a few weeks ago, that he actually managed to find his dad.
He did.
In the crowd.
Yeah, his dad was, and I read it in his book. He was running along. He didn't know where his dad was in the ground. He knew his dad and his brother were there. They'd come over for it. And he ran along and he spotted his dad. Literally, they were in the front row, or second or third row, and he spotted them in the crowd as he was running back. And that was random. I
know how Tim came to join the club. Would you like me to go into that? Have we got time?
Of course, we've got time. Yeah, we've got time.
Right. Well, he didn't grow his full size until quite late. His dad was quite a diminutive figure. Tim's not the tallest, let's be fair, and he was
5'10".
Well, he grew to that. I'm even a bit sceptical about even that, tell you the truth. That's probably that's probably with his boots on. He didn't figure in the Australian academy system. I'm not even sure he figured in the state one, which was New South Wales, which is the biggest population. But someone over there really could see something in him and recommended him to Alan Batsford, who had been a Millwall scout and has been again since, I think, although he's now the late Alan Batsford. And he phoned Alan and said, look, there's this guy, Tim Cahill. Can you get him a trial at Forest? And I believe his family and friends got together and paid his fare. So he went to Forest, but it was right at the end of the season, and they put him in a hotel. This is someone who's 16, probably nearly 17, not quite sure, no more than 17. Stuck him in a hotel, and no one spoke to him for 2 days. And they didn't arrange a game for him, so they hadn't taken it very seriously. Sometimes this happens at football clubs where at the end of the season there's other things going on. But he rang home and said, look, this is pointless, I'm coming home. They rang Alan and said, can you get him somewhere else? And Alan rang Bob Pearce and said, look, will you give a trial to this boy Tim Cahill? I'll bring him down. And that's what happened, and we put on a game. Can't remember if it was a friendly or a game amongst ourselves, reserves against youth teams, something like that, right at the end of the season. The decision was made instantly that this is someone we need to sign. The problem was, it was the summer we were in administration, and we had no money, and the decision to sign him would have been with the administrators, not with anybody at the club. So we knew we wanted to sign him. What could we do? Luckily, Tim's family knew of relatives they had living in Grays in Essex, and he went and stayed there for the summer. And I went over and got him on the day that the youth team reported back for training. Got him his lodgings, which were excellent, very near the training ground. Got his bank account sorted, his national insurance number. So I played a part which I've always been pleased to have done. A great player, one of Millwall's greatest players, and a great guy, because when he left, if you remember, ironically, we drew Everton in the FA Cup at the Den.
Always going to happen.
Yeah, Tim scored, put them in front, and didn't particularly celebrate, which didn't surprise me. And our equaliser was scored by young Marvin Williams. That's a name that many Millwall fans will have forgotten. He's now Academy Director at Sutton in the conference, or whatever it's called now, the National League. And so for the replay, I was lucky enough. I don't think Theo could go for some reason. I think he might have been out of the country. So there I was, giving it the big un in the Everton director's box, senior director, sitting at the boardroom table with Bill Kenwright on one side and his predecessor, Sir Philip Carter, on my other side. And my wife, who was a Scouser and an Evertonian by birth, was on the ladies' table, which is what used to happen in football in those days. You wouldn't get away with it today. And after the game, and Tim even scored the damn winner in that game, if I'm not mistaken. After the game, I was sitting there talking with Mr. Kenwright and Sir Philip Carter, and a young lad in a tracksuit came in and said, "Is Mr. Burnige here?" And Bill said, "Yeah, this is him here next to me." And he said, Mr. Burnige, Tim Cahill would like you and Jane to come and visit him in his box. He had the thought, he knew about Jane's condition, and he had the thought to do that. So Jay and I went down and had a drink or two with him and his other people in his box, one of whom was Leon Osman, I remember, who I think was a good friend of Tim's.
Good player as well.
Yeah, so what a thoughtful man. And
he's a lovely guy.
Hester wasn't there that night. My younger daughter, she must have been, because she was at Livermore. Yes, she was. She came to the box. That's right. I phoned her and said, "You better get over here."
And they let her in.
She was a student in Liverpool. She was walking down Bold Street one day on her own, much to her regret, because suddenly there was a bellow, "Hester!" from across the road, and it was superstar Tim Cahill ran across the road, threw his arms around her and said, "What are you doing here?" She looked around to see if anybody had noticed, so that they could corroborate that story. But sadly, nobody does corroborate it. But
why would you lie about something like that?
Shows you the character of the guy. And,
exactly.
He's a legend in Australia. He could be over in Australia living the life of Riley, but he's here in the UK. I think I know the reason. I think deep down, his ambition is to be a manager of an English club. Knowing Tim, he'll be aiming for a Premier League club.
Well, I know one in South London that he could manage one day.
Well, you never know. There might, when he's appropriately qualified and available, and we have an availability. You never know. But that's his ambition, in my opinion. I don't know if it says that in his book. I haven't actually read the book.
No, it doesn't say that, because I think it stops just before he rejoins us. I think he's still playing at that time. I think it's just before he leaves Australia to go to, I think he went to India, didn't he? Or something like that.
He did a David Beckham, didn't he? He played in India, he played in China, played back in Australia.
Didn't he play in America for a couple of seasons for the Red Bull?
I think he did. I think he did. But look, that's a measure of the man, and I'm glad you threw Tim Cahill into the mix. And what a wonderful way to end the programme.
It is.
Tim Cahill, scorer of the most memorable goal in Millwall's history, I would like to think.
Exactly, and he is. But I want to say, Jeff, thank you for doing this for us. These last two this show and the last one have been absolutely fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure to have spoke to someone like you with such history of Millwall and knowledge of Millwall. I'd like to have met your dad as well, because I'm sure he could have told me a few stories. But thank you for your time, Jeff, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, if my dad was still around, Gary, he died in 1983, a long, long time ago. Maybe we could ask him the truth of the Kevin Keegan story.
Well, he was supposed to come, wasn't he?
I would love to know the truth of that. The next time I bump into Kevin Keegan, as if I'm ever likely to, I'm going to see if I can find out a bit more. But that story is probably lost in the mist of time. But It's been a great pleasure talking about some of my heroes in Millwall shirts. I've really enjoyed it. I hope everybody else has. And there are many others we could have talked about, aren't there?
Indeed, there is. Maybe we'll do another couple of parts later on next season. And
when we're in the Premier League, maybe.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Jeff, and take care.
Bye now. Bye, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed the last episode featuring Jeff and Gary as much as I did. A further interview special is in the pipeline, so watch out on social media for updates. If you have someone you might like us to interview, give your reasons on an email addressed to nolutalking@gmail.com. That's NOLUTALKIN without a G. nolutalking@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll play out for you to practice for the new season with the Wall of Sound.